All right, let's get right into it. Today, we're cracking open a really fascinating analysis of the Hive blockchain. The goal? To figure out the unwritten rules of one of its most influential figures. To basically distill the moral axioms that seem to be running the show, based entirely on a deep dive into their actions.
So, the story of Hive, like a lot of blockchains, kicks off with this massive promise of a decentralized utopia, right? It's that dream of a platform where censorship is impossible, where your voice can't be silenced by any single person or group. But the analysis we're digging into today poses a pretty critical question. What happens when that big, beautiful idea of decentralization slams into the hard reality of concentrated power? This whole analysis really zooms in on one key figure, at the marquee mark, and makes the case that this person has become a kind of self-appointed judge, which creates this massive tension right at the heart of the platform.
Okay, so if there's a judge, how does the judgment actually work? Well, according to the source material, it all boils down to a couple of core principles, or axioms. And the very first one, it's all about the power of a single person's subjective opinion. This quote here from one of At the Marky Mark's colleagues really nails that first axiom. And here's how that principle looks in action. This quote, which is attributed directly to At the Marky Mark, well, it suggests a philosophy where just being efficient is way more important than being nuanced. Instead of carefully picking things apart, the approach is just to flag everything. A really broad stroke. So you might be thinking one person's philosophy is just that, right? A philosophy. But the analysis we're looking at argues that it's backed by a very real and very powerful technical infrastructure that turns that philosophy into action. Yeah, we're not just talking about ideas here. The source points to actual concrete systems allegedly run by At the Marky Mark. Things like a personal voting bot, a global blacklist that other apps and projects can plug into, these coordinated downvote trails, and even whole communities on the platform. And the reach of all this? Well, it's huge. According to the source, that global blacklist API alone is used by over half of all projects on Hive, including the major front ends that most people use. What that means is a decision made through that one API can ripple out across the entire platform. Now, this slide gets to the heart of the debate. The main defense you hear is, look, it's not technically censorship because the content is still on the blockchain. But the analysis here asks us to look at the reality for the user. What does it actually mean when your post is grayed out, your rewards are wiped to zero, and it's stuck behind a warning label? For all practical purposes, it's been silenced. The source also points to what it calls a strategy of plausible deniability. You see, even though this huge infrastructure exists, this quote shows how there's an insistence that there's no formal link to official anti-abuse groups like Hive Watchers, even though the source alleges that the same people are involved and they're going after the same targets. And that idea of informal connections and personal judgment, well, it leads us straight into the second major axiom that the source identifies, this perception that there's a double standard. Rules for thee, but not for me. Okay, so here the analysis points out what it sees as a major contradiction. This quote claims that At the Marky Mark himself is profiting from the exact kind of low-effort content that other people get flagged and downvoted for. And the question it raises is pretty simple. How is it okay for one person, but considered abuse for someone else? And the argument gets even bigger. It moves from just personal posts to what the source calls systemic selective enforcement. It brings up the case of a pretty notorious abuser on the platform who was supposedly just left alone by all the powerful accounts. The suggestion is pretty clear. If you're in the in-group, maybe the rules just don't apply to you. So what's the effect of all this on your average Hive user? The analysis includes quotes like this one, which show a real feeling of powerlessness. The vibe isn't a decentralized community. It's described as the law of the jungle, where one person is seen as the de facto ruler. So, after laying out the principles and the tech infrastructure, the analysis ties it all together. It claims to reveal the real rules of the platform, the unwritten moral axioms that are actually at play here. This slide just lays it all out so clearly. It's this stark contrast between the big promises of Hive and the alleged reality. A place where decentralization apparently means you can't oppose one leader, and censorship resistance means your post technically exists, but nobody will see it and it won't earn anything. The analysis boils this all down into what it cynically calls the rules of Hive Club. And these rules basically summarize everything we've just talked about. Rule 1, don't question authority. Rule 2, accept that big words like decentralization have been redefined. And maybe most importantly,
Understand that the rules are completely subjective, and they're drawn to protect the people already in power. And the source frames its final analysis as something more than just a critique of one platform. It presents it as a kind of repeatable playbook for how someone could, theoretically, gain and maintain an outsized level of control on any supposedly decentralized platform. So here it is, the alleged recipe for control. Step 1, get stake. That's the foundation of power. Step 2, build the tools to enforce your will, but make sure you call it anti-abuse infrastructure. Then get the community's own treasury to pay for it. And finally, use that system to crush anyone who earns without your approval, all while you extract rewards yourself. And if anyone calls you out, just hit them with the classic, "It's not censorship defense." And this quote is the source's final, sardonic takeaway on the whole situation. It's a total redefinition of a core ideal of crypto, twisting it to mean the exact opposite: centralization in the hands of whoever controls the tools of enforcement. So what do we make of all this? The analysis leaves us with this final, really thought-provoking question. It doesn't just call someone a hero or a villain. It asks us to think about a third, maybe more relatable possibility, that in any system, even a decentralized one, someone eventually becomes the de facto HOA president. Someone starts deciding which lawns are too long and which fences are the wrong color. And according to this analysis, understanding that person's power and their unwritten rules is what really matters.